It's a great honor and a privilege to introduce Sonja Chayen. Sonja, you were from Vienna and
Yes.
you were on the Kindertransport.
Yes, I was. Yes.
Wow, so could you relate your story, where you grew up and when you were born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Vienna, 1928, and my parents came from Poland, and so we were what they call Ostjuden in Vienna. The Austrian Jews were the ones that had become rich and wealthy. There was Jews, not really religious Jews, but a great many came from Poland, like into England as we heard today.
Yeah.
They came to Vienna, to Austria, and my parents. I have a sister who was a year older than I, and we grew up as a Jewish family in Vienna. And then when Hitler came, with a very short time, of course, Hitler had come in Germany, you see, in 1933, came to Austria in 1938, yes, in March, and immediately things started happening. We were thrown out of school, we couldn't, Juden verboten, you were not allowed to go into the parks, you weren't allowed to do various things. But the interesting thing was that there was nowhere else to go, you see, where you could have left Austria, but you had nowhere to enter, because unless you had money, there was some business to go to. So there we were. Now, we were very lucky, my sister and I, because we had, in Vienna, we had a nursemaid, you might say, who was Jewish, although she had been brought up as Jewish. And when Hitler came, she was advised to come to England. And in those days, unless you had money, you could get jobs in England as a domestic. And Annie, that was her name, Annie Buchsbaum, she had got a job in London as a domestic with a Jewish family. And I really don't know the circumstances, but my mother must have heard about the Kindertransport that was starting. Oh, perhaps I should mention the timing. There was the Kristallnacht in November the 10th. I was there, and I remember them knocking on the door at the middle of the night.
This was 1938.
Pardon?
1938.
Well,
in November 1938.
Yes, November 1938, yes. And knocking at the door in the middle of the night. And just as an example, what neighbors did, we were living in an apartment house. One didn't open the door when one knocked in the middle of the night. She came out, the neighbor, and said, "They're there, just keep on knocking." So, of course, opened the door, and they took my father away, like they collected the men. That was on the 10th of November. And after that, England, and I forget the name, there was talk about the Kindertransport. The history of it you must know from many other...
But can I ask, do you remember the burning of the shuls, of the synagogues?
Yes, I remember when we didn't live. There was a Jewish quarter. We lived in the 9th district. It was the 2nd district was the real Jewish quarter. So actually, in my neighborhood, I didn't see an actual synagogue, but you could see if you were kept at home. First of all, you weren't wandering about the town. But I remember going to the prison house and the next day to see if they were releasing my father. We were very lucky. My father was released the next day. But it was at that point then one heard about the Kindertransport. England had decided, gave permission. You must know the story of that. That was in the November. And what I don't know is how soon my mother heard of it and got in touch with Annie, who was by now a domestic in London with a Jewish family. And she persuaded them, or asked them, begged them to invite my sister and myself to come. And we were able to join the Kindertransport in January.
Can I just ask, that night of Kristallnacht,
yes,
or very soon after, do you remember walking in Vienna and seeing Jewish shops being destroyed?
Yes, I remember men having to scrub the...
Do you remember, you witnessed, you saw it?
Yeah, I saw it, yes.
And how was your feeling? Was there an air of...
I was I was more of a careless person. My sister, who was a year older than I, her basic memory, a strong memory, and she's now got dementia. The things she remembers are the sad things, and this story she will repeat again and again, of hearing the neighbors talk to each other, and one of them said to the other, there aren't enough lampposts in Vienna to hang all the Jews. And this made such a, she was a very more...
And these were neighbors?
The neighbors, because, we lived in an apartment house, and how people chat and talk on the corridors. And she heard these two, whether they said it loud enough to deliberately that she should hear, but this made... so when we were told we could come to England, she was delighted. There was none of that being afraid of, quite a lot of children. It was very difficult.
Did you go to a Jewish school growing up?
Well, I did. I went to a Jewish school until in the elementary school. I was 10. Left elementary school in the summer 1939. And in September, I started the Chayen Jewish gymnasium, a Jewish high school, the Chayen gymnasium. Everybody will know about it. Chayen, Rabbi Chayen in Vienna. And my sister was there already the year before. But the elementary school, I was in the ordinary.
And did you have any non-Jewish friends, neighbors, or did you play with non-Jewish?
Not friends. Neighbors, yes, we had a next door, our apartment house, and the next apartment was the family with a boy who was a little older than we, and we would occasionally, he had films, we would occasionally play with him, because, he lived next door, and it was that family who came out, and she said, they're there, don't stop knocking, be sure that, pick up my father on Kristallnacht. People that we played with and been with, and
they informed on you.
But another non-Jewish neighbor in the same house, she was friendly. But otherwise, no, we didn't have Jewish children. I mean, in my growing up in school, there must have been about 6 or 7 Jewish children in my class, and we were separated when they had their religious lessons. I remember coming, we were outside, we went out and came back, and I came back into the class, and they said to me, oh, you Jews killed Jesus. And they'd had their religious lesson. And I said, no, you must be mistaken, we don't kill people, I was sorry, I hadn't heard that story before, so it was, so there was this, they were being brought up like that, but we knew we were Jewish in the sense that walking, especially after Hitler came, if I were walking in the street and I saw a gang of boys coming, I would quietly cross the road. I knew that they would be, throw things at me or anything like that. It was definite, walking the streets, although we didn't live in a Jewish neighborhood. But that's how we got onto the Kindertransport. And this family, the Young, they obviously guaranteed for us. I don't know how my mother connected, but I know on one occasion the cultus, the Jewish culture, the Kultusgemeinde, they did organized all these things. I remember my mother queuing up there one night to be sure that our tickets were there. But I have an aunt, that's something else my sister remembers. I had an aunt who was very close. My mother and Aunt Tante were very close. And she had a little girl, Susie, who was about 2 years younger than I. So I was 10 and Susie must have been about 7. And my sister remembers this. She said, my auntie said to my mother, you're crazy? You're sending your children into a strange country? She wouldn't send Susie. She wouldn't send her little girl. And they finished up in the concentration camp, of course. My own family, we came over in the January. We came over to this family.
Okay, can I ask, do you remember the day when you left?
Yes.
How old were you at this
10.
time? You were 10.
I was 10.
And what happened? Did your parents take you to the train station?
They could come to we were allowed 1 case each. I was thrilled, I was happy, I was going. There was no question of, they were coming after me. I was going for a holiday. My mother had cooked some food for us, and my mother was a dressmaker, and she had made some new clothes for us, and I was thrilled. This was exciting.
And you were going with your sister?
I was going with my sister, and my sister had more sense. My sister was sort of knew that it was more serious than I did. I remember going in the train, and the little girl there was crying. And I said to her, "How old are you?" And she said, 10. I said, 10? And you're still crying, you know? So I was that sort of, I was a tough, unthinking child, I think.
And saying goodbye to your parents. Both your parents came to the train station.
My father and mother came to the
Was it it wasn't so traumatic because you
Not
thought
for
they were
me.
they were going to join you?
I thought they were going to join us, but they knew different. My sister remembers that the week before we left, my father took us round. You know, we had family, cousins, uncles, and she said she saw my mother who was crying. Never saw my mother in tears over this. They made us that it was all adventure and wonderful in England, and everything was going to be splendid. So I went with a very happy feeling, and so we went by train. We went to Rotterdam by train, and I'd never seen the sea, of course, in Vienna, and I was told we were going by boat, and now the sea and the boat, and I remember being very disappointed because I couldn't see any water. There was this big boat, which was like a big house, so we went into this house and arrived in England. I can still remember arrived in Liverpool. I think it's Liverpool Street Station we went from Rotterdam to Harwich, and from Harwich by train to London, and yes, Liverpool Street Station. And there we were picked up by this family who was looking after us. And I remember they tried to talk. Don't forget, I had no English. All I did today, we learned 2 songs, Daisy, Daisy. And my sister, when we got on the boat, she said, "What o'clock is it?" You learn the odd phrases. And she remembers that, "What o'clock is it?" And yes, we picked us up by car from Liverpool Street Station. And on the way, they're trying they want to buy us presents. What did we want? And of course, we didn't understand them. She said, "A doll? Did I want a doll?" They were trying to be very kind, of course. And of course, we were lucky, you see. Don't forget that Annie was there. She was their maid. She was a domestic. So when I came into the house, I knew, I saw her. And but we didn't stay there long.
Was it a non-Jewish family?
No, Jewish.
This was a Jewish family that fetched
yes,
you?
Yes, that fetched us, the family. And we stayed with them and they sent us to school. And I remember it was an open-air school in Regent's Park. And if I try to tell this to somebody, they say, "Well, they've never heard of a school in Regent's Park. It must have been the zoo." But I don't think it was. It was a private school and open. I remember learning French rather than English. But after we were there about 2 or 3 months, and I really don't know the circumstances, but they asked the Jewish Refugee Committee to find somewhere else for us. And we were sent down to a hostel in Newport, Monmouthshire. And I was very lucky. I've always been very lucky, all these stories. I've always been treated well. This Newport, the Jewish families in this, you know how Jewish families congregate around the synagogue. Yeah. And the rabbi, well, it wasn't even the rabbi, he was the sort of, who was running the shul. He suggested that rather the different families take single children, they would bound together, and they bought a house in Newport and took 12 little girls and put in a matron to look after us. And my sister and I were 2 of the little girls, and I was very happy there. We were very happy.
And were you communicating with your parents? Could you write letters or?
I've got some very nice letters from my father. My father did all the writing, and at the bottom my mother would say, "Papa has written everything to you, I just send you my love." And then after July or August, we had the letters only from my mother. My mother that the father, your papa isn't here at the moment. I found later, of course, that he'd been taken to Buchenwald, and he died. He was killed very early in November of that year.
In Buchenwald?
In Buchenwald, yes. They did. We heard later, my sister and I, we had a letter a few years ago now from 2 researchers in Vienna who were going through the work, any of the scientific work that the Germans did. And they did ethnic experiments on people. And my father had been collected apparently as soon as the war started in September. And they did this. She said, we didn't want any pictures and descriptions, and we didn't. But my sister, I think, sent them to Yad Vashem. But he was then killed. He died early in November '39. And they sent the ashes back to my mother, and actually his ashes are buried in the Jewish cemetery in Vienna, and I've been there, and we arranged to have a silver there for him. So, various things happened, but as I say, in Newport, I'm very lucky because I learned English so quickly, In fact, I did so well that got a scholarship, and I was allowed to go to the high school. And but then the matron changed. The matron left, and we had a couple from Vienna, Austrian couples, who were very, very good to us. But they had to leave. Newport. It was not. I was again lucky. I wasn't evacuated. You will find that a lot of the children were evacuated. But Newport was not an evacuation zone, with neither reception nor sending, so we could stay in the hostel. But the matron and they had to leave because they were Austrian. So, and it became obviously too difficult for the people, the Newport congregation, to keep us. So we were sent again, given back to the Jewish Refugee Committee. And my sister and I came to a hostel in London. That was in 1942. And again, I was very lucky because I was 14 at the time and should have gone to work. My sister was 15 and had to go to work. But where I lived, the matron, Mr. and Mrs. Margulis, I came with very good school reports, and they were very interested in education. So I was able to stay at school. And I was even able then to carry on and go to university, which was quite unusual, very few of the, really a very small percentage of the children that came were able, because usually they went to work by that when they were 14, 15. My sister went to work, but she had a commercial education, so she had quite a good job.
And can I ask, what happened to your mother? Did she manage?
My mother, no. Well, yes, she did. My mother went to Israel with Aliyah Bet. They were in 1941. I don't know if you've heard of the ship, the Patria. Yeah. That was the Patria. They arrived in Haifa harbor, little boat.
She managed to escape from Vienna.
But when they arrived in Haifa with the British were there. The British picked them up and were loading them onto this ship, the Patria, to send them to Cyprus or where else they were, or Mauritius, where they were putting them. And I don't know the story, whether it was a Haganah or something like that. They decided to damage the engines of the boat to delay the journey. Perhaps they could rescue some of the Jews in between, and the ship blew up. Either the dynamite was too strong or the ship was too rusty, but it blew up in Haifa harbor. Quite a lot of people drowned. My mother was saved, which was very lucky. And she was in Atlit. And they left. The Jews that were rescued from the water were sent to Atlit and allowed to stay in Israel. The ones who hadn't yet been put on the boat were put on another boat and sent away. So we heard from my mother. We heard through Red Cross letters, so we knew that, and we knew my father had been killed. We should have gone, not should have gone, America. My father had a brother in America who sent us affidavits before the war, but the Polish quota was very limited. I don't know if you know that.
They made it very limited.
They had so many visas, so we didn't get our visas at all. So that's when my father was taken. My mother escaped. We were in England, but in 43, apparently our visas arrived in London. And we were told to come to the embassy, and we were going to be shipped off to America to my family in America. But at that time there was a boat evacuation boat that had been sunk and going from England to America.
The U-boats.
The U-boats, and so the shipments were halted, so we didn't go. So I always say my life happened to me. I didn't, the things I didn't arrange these things for myself. I just followed what was happening. So that's how it was. It continued. So I say I was very lucky that I was able.
And when did you see your mother?
Well, I saw my sister. Then the war ended in 1945. We had a phone call from the Youthalier to say that there was one Youthalier certificate, and my sister took it. I was at school, so my sister came to Israel in 1945. I'm coming, but I'm finishing my schooling, and then I'm coming, and university education, I'm coming. I got married, I'm coming. I had children, I'm coming. The children came, 2 girls, and then I came. So that's how I landed up
But
here.
you saw your mum, you must have visited.
I saw my mum, I visited my mother, let me see, oh yes, of course, the year 1947. My mother had married again in Israel, and a very nice man who sent me a 1947 a plane journey. I travelled on a 2-engine Dakota with 10 people on board to Israel in 1947. It was a glorious holiday for 3 months. If I'm ever granted another year of my life, that's the year I would choose.
So can I ask, how was your reaction when you saw your mother again after all these years?
Very emotional.
It must have been incredibly emotional.
She was a very special person, my mother. She wanted me, she spoilt me. I mean, she hadn't seen me. This was 9 years. She said, it was in 1947. I last saw her in 1939. Yeah. So yes, she spoilt me, and she wanted me to enjoy myself, and I did. My sister had a group of friends by then.
And your sister remained in Israel?
My sister remained in Israel.
So she saw the founding of the state. She saw 1948.
Yes. And I used to visit her. Then I got married, and the first year we came to see and I met my mother. My mother came to Vienna to see whether my father had his factory there, whether we could retrieve anything. And she came from Israel, and I came from...
And did you manage to retrieve?
We met in Vienna, yes.
Were you compensated for anything?
Pardon?
Were you compensated? Or?
I think my mother mounted, yes, my mother perhaps was.
And do you know, have they put the brass... Now they put the brass stones outside the homes where Jews once lived.
Yes, the Volkerstone, yes.
Have they put for your family, for your father?
No, and I'm not sure that Vienna did.
Vienna did. They actually did. Yeah, maybe it's there. Maybe it's there.
Did.
Vienna did as well. I was in Vienna last year.
I was, yes. No, I didn't make any. I didn't sort of push it in any way. I don't know. The Vienna has in Viennese invitation to Vienna. My sister and I, we went to Vienna we could each bring brought my granddaughter, and we had a week in Vienna. They were very nice to us.
Was it emotional going back to Vienna?
Well, yes, but I was in a tram asking with my children, and not on that occasion. I took my daughter and my grandchildren to Vienna, and we were on a tram, and I'd been talking English to them, of course, and to the woman next door, I needed to ask the way, so I spoke to her in German, and I said, where, can you tell me where this was? She looked at me and she said, oh, you speak German? I said, yes, well, I was born in Vienna. And she said, oh, would you like to come and live here? And I said, no, before I thought. It was very, I didn't think, it was an impolite, immediate reaction.
Did you go back to your home where you grew up in?
I went back to the house. I didn't, and then we went, they met my mother there, yes. We went to the neighbor who was very friendly with us.
Did they allow you to go into your apartment?
No, I didn't go into the apartment. My sister went in, but when I took my children, I didn't want to go in the apartment. I took them up the stairs. I showed them the front door of my flat, but I didn't go to go in. My sister, though, apparently she knocked on the door and to show her son what it was, and she thought the people were a little bit sort of nervous, I didn't want to speak to them. So that is, so really I've been, one of my stories is a lucky story, because quite a lot of the children had bad experiences. Carla Pilpil, I'm telling you to meet, I believe, she was very badly treated, and quite a lot of the children.
And I think your story that you were with your sister, that
made a big difference.
I think it made a tremendous...
Made a complete difference, because we could talk about the past. We still were who we were. Whereas when you're on your own and you're a child, you become absorbed by what is going on and you forget. And having my sister there made a big difference.
And did you keep in touch with the maid that was...
With Annie?
With Annie?
Yes, I kept in touch with all the years, and I'm still in touch with her daughter now. And with it is interesting, her story is peculiar too, because she was an illegitimate child, and in those days, good Jews, she was sent into the country to be fostered. And by the time she came to us, she knew her story, but she hadn't met her parents. And we kept together all the time. And when in England, then when she was older, it depends, the Austrian, I don't get compensation. They were victims, the Austrians were victims. So they don't give any compensation.
Victims in italics.
What they do is I get a pension. They get a pension. And I arranged a pension for her, and she got that, and I'm friendly with her. And of course her daughter, but Annie wouldn't say that she was Jewish. She burnt all her, she had such bad experience of being Jewish, she burnt all her birth certificates and all that. But her daughter, found out, she'd met some people who knew Annie and knew her mother, that she was Jewish. And I remember her asking me, was it true? Did I know? Was her mother Jewish? And I knew that her mother didn't want anybody to know. I said, well, I really don't know. I was only a child. But of course I knew she was Jewish. And of course Pamela is Jewish. And I've been continuously friendly with Pamela, and I'm now friendly with her son. So in a way, this Annie saved our lives, you see, because of her that we were able to come to England.
But I think it was also very unselfish of your parents to have sent you. They were...
I can't imagine how they could have done it.
It must have been exceptionally difficult, because they knew what was happening. They knew that might be the last time they're going to see you.
I think they must have known, yes. Yes, I was thinking, all the time, when my children grew that age, I couldn't have sent them away, but again, a lot of us sort of know that it's sort of, this Kindertransport organization was started by Inge's sister. She said when her granddaughter was 16, she suddenly remembered that she was 16 when she came to England, and she advertised in the news. Haven't you heard of that story?
Yeah.
Advertised in the newspaper and the radio to say that that's when she made the meeting for the Kindertransport reunion, and I went to that. So when I first heard about it, I thought, what's this? What's it to do with me? I'm finished with this. It's too long. But I did go, and I suddenly realized that these were my friends, and I had a great deal in common. There's something in common. I don't quite know what. A lot of us were thinking in terms of the jobs. We're all giving jobs: teachers, doctors, nurses. We somehow felt we were alive, and we had to. There was a reason for us being alive. We had to do something to respond to that. And I think we were grown up like that, feeling, I never turn a hand away. Anybody who needs anything, I feel, one needs to give back somehow. I think we all do that. It's a feeling we've been saved, and why? Well, you've got to say thank you somewhere, somehow.
And do you have often reunions with other Kindertransport survivors?
But
do you have a lot of reunions?
Yes, well, I did tell you.
And you're in touch with a lot of...
Well, fewer and fewer, because they're not, we're getting older.
Well, you look young and you're amazing, and but you're so positive, from having such...
Yes.
Some people, as you said, didn't
yes,
have such positive experiences.
I think it must be nature, because my sister's not so positive. My sister is much more worried. My sister is much more anxious. So, it's had a different effect on her than on me. Well, probably different natures for a start, but in many ways I consider myself so lucky, that I
and which high school did you go to?
Where?
In London.
In London? It was during the war. It was Dalston County Secondary School. Dalston, yes, Dalston County Secondary School. And because when I came to London, the other kids had been evacuated, you see, 1942. Anybody my age wasn't there, so to speak. They'd all been evacuated and were away. So there was this one school that was opened, and then I got a scholarship to university, to Imperial College, so I was very
And what did you study at university?
Pardon?
What did you study at university?
I did a biology degree, and then I did microbiology research, so I've kept, not now, this is my other life, completely my other life.
That's amazing. And did you know about Rabbi Schoenfeld growing up?
Well, I knew about Rabbi Schoenfeld because in the area where I lived, there was Victor High School. I wasn't one of Rabbi Schoenfeld's children. What happened was Rabbi Schoenfeld made a point of getting the very religious. He went to the religious areas in Vienna because he felt that the Kindertransport wasn't taking too much notice of whether you were religious or not, and they took us to quite a lot of the children were were in Christian houses, and because there weren't also all that many Jews. I was thinking from their point of view, would I have taken a child? And one sort of feels that they should have done, but it was a very big thing. A lot of people did, took a child in, and a stranger. So quite a lot of Christians and several of the religious ones, Christian ones, took in children. So from that point of view, but I was lucky. I was with the Jewish all the time.
All the time.
All the time, yes. And then I came to London. I didn't mention that. Yes, that's when I was really very good, because I continued to go to school, and I had the B'nai Brit, the B'nai Brit financed my first year of my education in college. The B'nai Brit financed.
Really?
So I've been so lucky. They always had a helping hand stretched out for me. So that was really very good. So there you are. So you've got one of the happier stories.
So I'm just going to go. Sure. So I just want to thank you. I just want to thank you so much. It's been such a great honor and privilege to hear your story. It really is. You're an inspiration to all of us, really.
Well, very
You're so
lovely.
positive, and you went through such a tribulation, such a life-changing event that
Yes.
some children can never
Well, that's,
overcome.
yes, no, I was very, very lucky.
But I think
I was just the right age, old enough, young enough to be sort of stupid and old enough to be able to cope, not to, and because I had a sister a year older than I, it made a big difference. It sort of fixed me still in the person that I was. I didn't get lost. I don't know if you've heard several stories. I'm sure some of them are very different.
Some are very different.
Some of them are very different.
Yours is very inspirational, and it's incredible.
Well, yes, I know I've been lucky. I'm hearing some of the other children's stories.
Well, it's been a great honor and a privilege, and I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's been such an honor and a privilege.
Don't see why.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.